everybody doing? It is I, the Desert Viking, here with another Week 28 talk video. So today, what's on my mind is I want to talk a little bit about the lost art of communication. Lost art of communication. Something that I see as a plague amongst our people, my culture. I'm going to assume it's a human phenomenon, but I'm going to basically bow out of any other culture because I don't know what's popular in your culture or not. I can tell you in Western culture, communication is definitely a dead art. And I say dead on purpose and not dying. I think that it's been dead for a while. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think our inability to communicate properly and effectively hamstrings and harms our ability to have relationships. Case in point, human beings are very emotional creatures. We drive off of our emotions. Men are supposed to be more logical thinking, whereas women are more emotional, but I find people in general tend to be emotional, period. To include myself, of course, because I am a human being. And I try to purge that by maintaining a rational course of thinking. It's not always easy. I understand there are times where I fail as well. But if you're a follower of this channel, then I'm assuming that you are trying to at least think in a higher space. And so I am going to present to you this topic today on communication, and maybe this can help you. I'm going to use myself as a case study. Now, my last relationship failed spectacularly for a few reasons. One of those major components, though, was communication. And when she left, the day she left, the last day I ever saw her, she even commented, "I'm really bad at communicating." And she's very, very correct. She was very bad at communicating. She gets a 0 for communication because she communicated nothing during our relationship. But when she left, she had a laundry list of complaints, some of which were legit. Others were, probably not so much. Some of the complaints were, "You're just not hot enough." Now, whatever, I can't do anything about that other than what I've been doing. But her failure to communicate meant I could not address any of these little problems she was having. And it can be said that the little problems that were presented to me aren't really the issue in that relationship. It was more the bigger problems, which were you're not hot enough and the other things that I've talked about that I'm not going to get into again on here. But taking things at face value, if we look at the multitude of complaints that I received, most all of them could have been addressed by communication, by simply stating, this is the desired state I need to be in. This is what I'd like you to work on. Let's work on this together. That was never done. That's just the most egregious example that I have, but certainly not the only. And as I've stepped back out into the world and I have met newer people, I find that the lack of communication is still staggering and still plenty, there is no conversations to be had. It's jump to conclusions, assume conclusions are fact, base your decisions based off of those conclusions. That is never a good place that you want to be in. You are making decisions based off of your emotions at that point. Now, this is why they say, as we get older, we accumulate baggage. And baggage is damage, and that we're all damaged people. And what that's really saying, digging deep into there, is that trauma or bad things that have happened to us, we are going to respond emotionally to going forward. We are going to make every person in our life carry the sins of the people who have hurt us, because we are going to jump to conclusions and just assume that something we're seeing is reminiscent of a behavior that has occurred in the past that harmed us. And then we're going to make our decision based off of that. You can't do that. Okay? You just simply cannot do that. Now, communication styles, etc. What do I look for in people in general? The one thing I probably despise the most is that somewhere along the line, trying to get to know somebody turned into a job interview for a lot of people, meaning they expect you to just constantly ask a bunch of questions. To me, that's not a natural way for me to communicate. I do not naturally communicate in that way. And any people in my life who I've known for a long time, I have never subjected them to intense questioning. You find out someone's personality over time. Okay? So I don't like the job interview process. I don't like to be barraged with a bunch of personal questions unless I say, ask me questions. Then that's fine. But a constant barrage of personal questions, like I'm not going to be able to answer all those all the time, or I'm not comfortable with answering those all the time. You have to let those things develop naturally. We're in such a hurry that it's got to be this constant barrage me with questions. And if you're not asking a ton of questions, that automatically means to them that you're not interested, which is not true. If my language style, however, doesn't facilitate asking a million questions, what then? Now, the logical response would be to bring that up in conversation. But that rarely happens. Instead, we jump to a conclusion and we make our decision based off that conclusion and we go on from there. That's not going to get you guys anywhere in relationships in general. Friendships, romantic, otherwise, man or woman. You have to, if your needs aren't being met, identify what those needs are verbally. Or if you can't speak it, then in some other way, communicate what your needs are and let the other person then respond. If they choose to ignore what you've put out, then they're not interested in you. And that's fine. Otherwise, you have to give them a chance to be able to navigate what's going on in your mind, because nobody is able to read minds, and nobody is it's not fair to expect someone to just know what you think should be how things are, because that's what happens a lot. We have an idea in our head. This person should be doing these things. That person is not doing these things. Therefore, I'm unhappy, and so I'm just going to bail. Our entire culture is based on, it seems to be, based on avoidance. Meaning, as soon as we see something we don't like, we're out the door. We bail. And that's from trauma. That's from broken people making broken people. And I understand the root of it just fine. But you're not going to progress your relationships if that's how you choose to react to them. If you don't give the other person, if you don't identify issues with the other person or an issue you might be having, they can't reasonably respond to you or adjust or come up with a compromise. So I'm going to give some examples in my life. Number one, I'm an introvert. What does that mean? That means small talk kills me. I have never been interested in small talk. Now, I understand I have to do that sometimes. I choose not to if I can help it. I just don't enjoy it. Now, I can talk forever with someone who I enjoy talking to, who we can have deep, meaningful conversations. That's what I'm looking for. That's my communication style. And I let that be known pretty upfront with anyone. I'm an introvert. I don't like social situations where we're going to talk about plants or your shoes. I just don't get into that. Now, my last relationship, I let that be known up front right away. And she was like, that's awesome. I'm the same way. Now, here's a pro tip. She wasn't the same way at all. She was an extrovert. She liked socializing. She was very, very into her social status. And she saw introversion, me, a true introvert, as embarrassing and harming social status because it made her extrovert friends not comfortable to be around me because no one knows, because I don't have anything to say. I'm not good at small talk. But I communicated very, very clearly that this is how I am. And it was communicated back to me very clearly that that's fine when it wasn't. So not only do you have to present factual information to the other people, it is up to you as a receiver to also process and transmit feedback in an honest way. Because if it's not okay with you that the other person's an introvert or doesn't like small talk, and if social status is your big deal, then either this person's not right for you, or you need to find a way to not put them into uncomfortable positions if you really like that person. You're not going to stick them into positions that harm them or make them uncomfortable. And that's just something that's not done very often. Number two, I hear this a lot. This word narcissist thrown out everywhere. That is like I don't even. It's so common of a word. True narcissists only make up 3 to 5% of our population. All people, all people present some of the dark triad traits. Okay, you, me, everybody presents some dark triad traits. And what is that? Narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Every human being exhibits some level of those. But a true narcissist would have that bar jacked in the narcissism phase, where they only think of themselves. Now, why do I hear that word about me a lot? Well, you have a YouTube video or channel, and that's all about you. Of course, you're a narcissist. Okay, so that's funny. Because I don't grill people interview style, what happens is during a conversation, if something comes up that I relate to, I'll talk about it from my perspective. That's how I communicate. So to people, that's narcissistic because I'm talking about myself. Now, I do ask people to provide me, tell me some background about yourself. What do you like? Here's the thing. If you don't have anything meaningful to present, if you don't have anything to talk about, all I have left to fall back on are the things about me to try to bring up to generate conversation. Because the conversations that I gain a lot of information about people usually stem from when we're talking back and forth and they bring up an experience that I've shared and I can ask them about it, or I'm bringing up an experience and they've shared it and we can talk about it. That's how you bond. If you, as my recipient to my conversation, are not offering anything back, or you are not starting a conversation with me, and I'm always the one that has to generate the conversation, we're never going to have a bond. And I'm always going to, for my communication style, I'm always going to have to fall back to bringing things up from my perspective. That's not narcissism. I don't only care about myself. I care about other people. But if they don't have the ability to communicate that to me, things that we can share in common to talk about, our communication is basically going to be null and void at that point. And that's something that happens very commonly. One of the things that I really hate about just dating in general, trying to meet new people, is that most people, I don't know that they don't have anything interesting to say. It's just that they don't know how to communicate it very well. And so when I ask, tell me a little bit about yourself, I usually get the same scripted response, almost like I live in the Matrix and these are NPCs. And those responses are, well, I like to travel and I work. But those aren't things that, and we can talk about where you like to travel, and that's usually what will happen, but that's a very short-lived walk. I can talk for days about the things that interest me. So what interests you? Those are the things I'm looking for. What are the things that we can bond over? That's what I'm interested in. And that can be challenging in general with the communication just isn't working. So that happens to me quite a bit, or I have found. 3, this happens to a lot of people, but you get really engaged with somebody and you have really good back and forth. And then you meet the person and then they're gone. They ghost after that. They just aren't interested. That's a very common thing today. We call that word is computer brain. And what computer brain is because we have so many options that you'll meet somebody online and you'll build up this image of that person. And then when you meet in person, you see that, you've built up like this mega movie star image of them and they're not that. So you move on and you ghost. And that's a common thing. You can read about it everywhere. So I know it's not just me that experiences that. It's something to definitely be afraid of, or not, maybe not afraid is not the good word. It's something to be cautious of. Because people do have a ton of options, and especially in the West with these apps, they'll just keep cycling through them. And the thing I encounter a lot of is, I do work out and I've got a pretty good upper torso, but I carry a belly. And when they see the belly, like, because they had it in their mind that I was like jacked. And I'm not. I'm okay. I do pretty good. I can pass a military PT test for an 18-year-old, so I know I'm fit, but I'm not like a movie star. So you'll get that. Now, is that a miscommunication? That's an internal miscommunication. That's on you. So when you're talking to someone and you paint this picture of that person, and then you meet them, and then you ghost them after that, um, some people just want to play around, I guess. A lot of times you'll see that if you're ghosted, social media is pretty good tattletale, and they've hooked up with an ex or someone else, and that's just going to happen. You have no control over that. But what you do have control over is when you're talking to someone, not painting this picture of what they are that isn't real, or not reality, and that can be difficult to do, and that's why meeting is important. Yes, you can fall in love without meeting. People used to do it all the time. The problem is when you throw in the apps and everything, and you've got all these things attacking your attention, that it's always a comparison game, and the comparison game is never good. People can't make decisions when they're given too many choices. So you have to be able to unplug from all those apps. Be like, okay, I like this person. I want to be with this person. I want to pursue this person. So you have to make that known, right? But that's also an important factor. You have to make it known. I like you. I want to see you. What do you see happening with us? Where do you see this going? Don't assume. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't do anything like that. Ask very, very directly, where do you see this going? And work out, if their answer is not something that you think you can work with, that's fine. But communicate that instead of just ghosting and disappearing. Hey, it's not working. You're too busy, or I need this, or whatever. But you should also give them the chance to respond, because if it's you're just not giving me enough attention, maybe they were busy that day. Maybe they didn't feel good. Maybe they had a bad day at work and they just weren't, available. Especially if you just met someone, there's a billion other reasons why they may not have been so responsive to you, other than they're banging someone else at that moment. But we, if we've been hurt, are going to jump to that conclusion. But you can't do that. You have to separate yourself from your emotions. And if you really like that person, ask. You have to be able to ask. You have to be able to communicate. And if you can't do that, well, you're going to have a reoccurring cycle of going back and forth like this. Another thing for me personally, I don't do well with emotional arguments. Overly emotional arguments. If someone is irrational and they've demonstrated irrationality to me, I typically will step back and disconnect, because you can't argue in an arena with someone who's emotional, because logic doesn't matter to an emotional person. So if I say something and someone takes that and then gets really mad or triggered by that, and they jump to a conclusion, they attack me based off of that, or then they just disappear and then try to come back later, I'm probably not going to want to talk to that person again, because that's irrational to me. And I understand people have been hurt. People jump to conclusions because they're hurt, but you have to be able to separate yourself from emotional and rational thought. That's important to me. So I don't expect people to be perfect. I know that there are times where I may jump to a conclusion, but try. If you really value people in your life, you have to try to communicate with them. You have to explicitly state your intentions. I want this thing. Is this something you want? How do we get to that point? If something's bothering you, hey, it really bothers me about this thing that you do or don't do. Can we work on this? Hey, I would really like to do this thing. Can we do this thing? Right? Instead of just not saying anything and assuming you know the answer, you have to be explicit. You have to let other people have a chance to respond to what you want and not expect them to read your mind. It's not going to work that way. It can't work that way. So my little ramble today about communication, the lost art of communication. Step up your communication game. Take a moment. Think about some emotional things that you may have jumped into conclusions for and how you could communicate better. Think about how relationships may have been hurt or destroyed because you didn't communicate or because the other person didn't communicate with you. How did that make you feel when you're accused of things or you're told all these things that you're deficient in, but you never had a chance to really deal with or work on because you were never told that? There was just no way you could deal with it because you didn't know. And keep those thoughts in mind in your day to day as you're communicating with the people you love or that you're trying to love or that you're trying to learn. Because I know we've all been through stuff. We all have our own traumas. We all have our own issues. Do not let the people in front of you, those being the people you're meeting, the new people, carry the sins of the people behind you. Because that's not fair to them or to you. So keep that in mind. Thank you for hearing my ramble. I appreciate it. If you have any comments, as always, drop them in the comment section. I appreciate you. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.